Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and now we're going to discuss one of the new skills that were revealed today, and that is Net, which is another skill for the Falconer, but this one can be used as any class. But let's go ahead and dive into a lot of these nodes and just how this skill works. So, Net is where you leap backwards and you throw a net out which snares enemies and deals physical damage. Netted bosses and rare enemies have 35% less movement speed. All other enemies, which would be magic and normal, will be immobilized. It has a 6 mana cost with physical, throwing, and dexterity as scaling tags, and added damage applies at 100% effectiveness. Nets last 3 to 5 seconds at random on each enemy. Alright, let's dive into some of these nodes. Let's go ahead and start on the right hand side. Strongly woven. The net snares enemies for a longer duration, so between that 3 and 5 seconds, it'll be increased by 40%. Appear on Hunters of Heroet. Net hits chill bosses and rare enemies, while other enemies are stunned for a short duration. Additionally, you gain mana for each moving enemy hit. This effect adds a 10-second cooldown to Net, but you can gain some mana back. You get a 2-second stun on normal enemies, and then of course you apply 3 stacks of chill on bosses and rares. For Engineering Smarts, Net has a shorter cooldown. You can get up to 60% reduced cooldown recovery speed for it, and with Acrobatic, you now jump further when using Net, and it has a reduced cooldown. Net gains the Transversal tag. Jump distance per dex, 3%, so if you have 100% dex, you can jump 3 times farther, which is absolutely crazy, or technically with 300% increase, it would be 4 times farther, but still absolutely nuts, and then another 35% cooldown reduced, so between that would be 95%, which should take that 10-second cooldown to just barely above 5 seconds, which isn't too bad for a movement skill. Then up above we have Entangled Weapons. Netted enemies deal less physical damage. We have Exposed Bait. Your Falcon deals more global damage to netted enemies. You can make your Falcon do 40% more damage, so you could definitely throw a net out and then have your Falcon use Falcon Knives, or you could use Dive Bomb, or it could just do its normal hits, so it's a good way to boost its damage. With Weakening Threads, the net hits apply frailties to enemies. Surprise Snare. Net hits cannot be dodged, so that's really helpful, especially in the end game when you have modifiers like enemies can dodge hits. This makes it so that you can't miss. We have Tangle Wire. Net hits slows enemies as well, so a lot of debuffs out of the net so far that you can put on enemies. We have Tangled and Prone. Netted enemies and enemies slowed by the Tangle Wire cannot dodge and cannot avoid critical strikes, which is absolutely crazy. Then we have Leading the Hunt. Using Net grants you the Huntress advantage buff for a short duration, granting you more global damage against slowed or immobilized enemies. And you get 10% more damage. Not absolutely crazy, but you get that for 6 seconds. Doesn't say anything about stacking or not, but I'm going to assume that it doesn't, but if it does, that could get crazy. And then with Quick Throws, while you have Huntress advantage, you now also have global increased throwing attack speed. 20% speed is absolutely poggers. As we work down the other side, we have Agile Hunter. You jump further while using the net, another 12%. Into the shadows, when directly using net, you now throw a smoke bomb after jumping, which is pretty cool. I'm going to assume that smoke bomb will have a cooldown. I don't think that you can... This effect only works if smoke bomb is off cooldown. Yeah, so I'm going to assume it puts it on cooldown as well. And then Assault of the Huntress. You now jump forwards when using net instead of backwards, and it's thrown behind you, so a different way to play it, different direction. We have Trickster Artist. When using net, you drop caltrops at your starting location after jumping. Ooh, so you can work caltrops into it as well. Zone of Control. The caltrops from all sources deal damage in a larger area. The Tinkerer's Combo. If net hits an enemy, you now also throw caltrops at your target location where the net hits, so an additional way to get even more caltrops. Silvered Spikes. Your improved caltrops base critical strike chance from all sources per 10% global slow chance. So if you have a 100% slow chance, you have 10% more base critical strike chance with your caltrops. So an easy way to scale it up, especially since you can easily get 100% slow chance as an easy suffix on a weapon. On the other side, we have Rendering Wires. Net hits have a chance to cause enemies to bleed. You can get up to 200%, which seems quite a bit. That's actually a lot. Advanced Engineering. Net snares enemies in a larger area, so it hits in a larger area. Bold Throw. You no longer backflip when using a net, so I assume this would remove the transversal from it if it had that tag, since you were moving. We have Net Trap. Net now throws a trap that releases a net at a nearby enemy when it triggers. You can have a maximum of 6 net traps active at once. They last up to 30 seconds. So you throw out a net when it's activated. You also get a trap with it, which is pretty nuts. And then of course you can work the caltrops into that as well. Server of Tricks. You now throw additional net traps with each throw, but net costs additional mana. The mana cost of +5 really isn't that bad for having 3 being thrown instead of 1. And then for Spear Trap, net traps now also use Puncture for you when they are triggered. This will use the melee or bow version of Puncture depending on which weapon that you have equipped. What I think is absolutely nuts about this is that Puncture is going to use the Puncture skill tree. So Puncture has a ton of bleed opportunity in it. Caltrops have a bunch of bleed potential with them. And then you have bleed chance with net itself. So having nets do traps, having nets do caltrops, and having nets do Puncture, that's a lot of synergies going on, along with the fact that you can have a ton of debuffs on enemies, which I think is absolutely crazy. Then we have Barbed Net. Net causes enemies to take physical damage over time and cause them to bleed each second, so even more bleed. Then we have Voltaic Device. Net's base physical damage is converted to lightning, and then everything that would normally be physical is then all converted to lightning as well, such as bleed becoming lightning resistant shred. Additionally, nets deal more damage per global shock chance, which is pretty cool. We have Curved Hooks. Nets deal more damage, and bleeds that inflict last longer. You can get up to 50% more damage and bleed duration. Seems like bleed is going to be a really good build with nets involved. We have Acid Snare. Net's base physical damage is converted to poison. Consequently, this damage scales with increases to poison damage and no longer physical. All bleed chance is converted to poison chance for net. And our last point here, Trappers Crescendo. Net deals more damage per 100 dodge rating. Now I think this one's absolutely nuts. And the reason I think this one's nuts is because you get a 1% more damage per 100 dodge. So if you have 10,000 dodge rating, that would be 100% more damage. Now that may sound insane, and 10,000 dodge rating may sound like a number that's really hard to get, but you have to remember that every time you shift, you can get a ton of flat dodge rating per point of dex for 1 second. So if you shift and then throw nets, and then shift and throw some nets, you can get a lot of more damage out of this multiplier, because it is possible to get 10,000 plus dodge out of shift based on how much dex you have, which is really, really crazy. But overall, I really like this tree. It has a lot of secondary, tripleary, quadrupleary procs that you can do. It has a ton of debuffs. You can play it as physical with bleed. You can play it as lightning. You can play it as poison. So it has a ton of things. You can play it proccing melee. You can play it as bow. And then all the debuffs are just absolutely crazy. Being able to slow, the frailty, the shred, just all of it. Overall, I really like it. And in the gameplay, it looks like a very smooth skill to use. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with some gameplay. Let me know what your thoughts are on it in the comments below. As always, stay safe and have a good one.